There's been a running debate about floodplain harvesting in the northern part of the Murray-Darling Basin, particularly in southern Queensland and northern New South Wales. Nobody has been hotter on this than the member for Murray in the southern part of New South Wales, Helen Dalton. Ricky Lambert on our Flow News 24 team caught up with Helen, and she put her response from the New South Wales government that in effect has claimed that she's wrong, and she certainly has hit back saying that the New South Wales government position on floodplain harvesting that is rubbish, and that the so-called emergency provisions to divert water on floodplains could be used to divert water in circumstances just like this current weather system and flooding that we're seeing in the northern part of New South Wales, and that could in fact be a chance for those on that part of the floodplain to divert water for the use of irrigation at a later point when it is a part of a floodplain. Now, this is the question. This is what Helen had to say as Ricky spoke to her yesterday.
This floodplain harvesting that you've been very vocal about and talked about a regulation that came into Parliament late last year, I think, or maybe early this year, you're quite across it. Well, we've got this response we've received from the New South Wales government suggesting that you've got the wrong end of the stick. You've seen some of that. What is your response?
Look, that's rubbish. This regulation is really allows irrigators to harvest an unlimited amount of water under the guise of emergency provisions. And we know that because in the parliamentary hearings, the government confirmed an irrigator can take water under this regulation. And there's really no way to police this.
This is quite topical when you consider there's quite possibly that sort of floodplain event going on right now with all the rain that's falling in the north. And so someone could say, well, for emergency purposes, we need to divert that to stop flooding downstream. Is that kind of the argument?
Yeah, for sure. There is an emergency going on now, but this supposedly has something to do with construction sites and things like that. It's not made it clear for that. They tell me it's mostly for urban construction sites. The regulation is a bad regulation anyway in every way because it's incredibly ambiguous. It does cast a wide net and it can allow floodplain harvesting an unlimited amount of water. And of course those communities on the Darling, that water would make its way naturally to the Darling and supply water for critical human needs, communities, to fill up the Menindee Lakes, Indigenous, and it's another way of a grab. And I just wish the government would come clean on this because we've got high-profile people that look at water all the time and they can see you can drive a truck through this regulation. It's very, very unclear, and I think it's been deliberately made to be ambiguous.
So just to use the current situation as an example, is it your belief under this regulation someone who wants to store water could use the current emergency with the flooding that's going on to erect a levee bank, for instance, and hold that back, say it's because it was during an emergency, but actually use it for irrigation purposes later on?
That's exactly right, although they're saying you're not allowed to use it for irrigation, but there's no regulator to stop them doing that. And if you're supposed to report this, if you're going to take water, you're supposed to report it to the regulator. And really no one's going to do that. There's only a minuscule measly fine of $1,500, so it's pretty cheap water. Yeah. So it's kind of like a car thief reporting the theft to the cops. Is that really going to happen? I doubt it.
So a fine of $1,500, that's it if you breach the conditions under the New South Wales law in relation to floodplain harvesting. Seems to me that there's not much will from the government to stop it from happening. And it seems to me that Helen Dalton has made some pretty good points there, and if they're not listening to her at a state level, maybe she needs to get into federal politics and have a position at the table so that they do listen to her. One wonders whether there are enough advocates really that are standing up for the Murray-Darling Basin as Helen Dalton is. I think there's a lot of people that have got vested interests, and maybe it's because some of the politicians own water but don't feel compelled to have it declared on a register.